Well, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Health Made Simple show. I'm here with our host, Dr. Bart Precourt, who has been a healthcare practitioner for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including chiropractic, kinesiology, acupuncture, functional nutrition and supplementation, and lab testing, all out of his clinic, Balanced Health Studio in Seagrove Beach, Florida, as well as virtually all over the world. So he's also the founder of the Health Edge program, which is a cutting-edge health program for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to take their health to the next level. He's worked with celebrities and athletes all around the world. And so tonight, before we dive into I Just Don't Feel Right, we have some clinical insights, right?
We do. So I have two I want to share, both of which came out of today's practice. Today was a great day, an extended day. So the way I practice, I kind of finish when I finish. So and today finished about 3 hours late. So I just made it home in time to say hi to my wife, and I barely
jump on the show with us.
Yeah. So I literally just kind of rolled right in here. And so the first clinical insight, an interesting situation, and I've been pretty close to it over the years. So it's a couple, my husband and wife, who have both been diagnosed with cancer. And we deal one, right, and then two. Yeah,
the family, that would be so hard. Yeah,
in different times. So there's a good part of this story though, and I was really like set back a little bit. So there's a great little, I don't know if setback's the right phrase, but like kind of encouraged, I think is the right word, or kind of re-encouraged about the fact that people can see through the tunnel at times. So the lady, they're both in their 60s, and about 5 years ago, I started working with her, maybe a little bit longer than that. And then, so yeah, it's been longer than that I've been working with her. And she's from out of state. She comes from out of state to come see me, her and her husband, and they're absolutely wonderful people. And she eventually got diagnosed with a cancer, it was bladder cancer. It was a long 3-year journey. And she chose to take an alternative route. And and I'm telling you, Karen, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I was through the whole thing through every 3 years. I'm not talking 3 weeks. I'm not talking 3 months. I'm talking 3 years. And a lot of the people out there that have really dealt with tough sicknesses and illnesses, cancers, we forget that battle is a battle. And especially when you decide that you're going to be the one that is in charge. And I don't mean that she was in charge of what took place, but she decided what she would do and not do. So she definitely did some, progressive, let's say everyday modern medicine, but she took it mostly from a holistic perspective. And after 3 years, we can say, thankfully that she is clear. And she understands that diagnosis, just like anyone else who's had cancer understands that is today's diagnosis. There was a time prior that you were clear, right? And then they get clear because of all the things that they're doing, hopefully, and you're in this clear moment. And she knows that she'll go back for these tests, and there's a possibility that it shows up again, which in a weird way is good because it keeps her motivated.
Yeah, she's got to keep up with those health things, because when you get back to what caused the cancer, really, it can come back, right?
Yeah. Which is interesting in my second clinical insight that I'm going to share, because that right there, that point right there is very, very important. So everyone listening, kind of clue into that point right there, that she can't go back.
No. Yeah.
Because there's a chance that if you go back to what you were doing before, you're going to experience what you experienced before. So, and this really holds true in life. Like I think about, my wife and I were just talking about some people in our staff members that have like relationship issues, and they're repeats. Like if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same result. So whether it be your health, wealth, or relationships, we want to really use our history, our past, to form and shape our future to move in the direction of really where we want it to go. But if you find yourself doing the same thing, dating the same type of person, spending the same kind of money, you're probably going to repeat the same thing. All right. So that's one part. And the second part was the husband. And through it all, he's been amazing, completely supportive, changed his diet, did all those things that an amazing man, an amazing spouse would do. And he did all those things. And as she gets to the tail end of her thing, he gets diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Oh.
Yeah. So here is why I'm sharing this story. So you know what she says today when I see her? She says, "I'm really glad I went through what I did, so I could be here for him to help him through his."
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
That perspective in life right there, just
Yeah.
in life, we often think that our shortcomings, the things that happen to us that are bad, an accident, a trauma, a loss of a loved one, a cancer diagnosis, we think that it's like a why me.
Mm-hmm.
And in this situation, this young lady, again, 60s yet, has this incredible moment of, I'm glad I went through that so I could be there for him. So I know what he's going to go through.
Yeah.
Like that perspective is why I'm sharing this clinical insight. So absolutely amazing. And it's so interesting to me how incredibly powerful it is, the mindset that we choose.
Yeah.
And we had that discussion. I told us, man, I said, I'm so amazed that you just said that. And she looked at me puzzled. And she's like, well, because she said, that's something that you would have told me to say. Like, because we have a really good relationship.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, but I didn't live that. I'm like, I could use those words, but I didn't go through a 3-year battle with cancer.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I isn't that, and she was like humble about it. She's like, isn't that the way everyone would feel about it? And I said, no.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes people don't think that way, but that is a choice. And that's really why I share it. So she has this terrible thing that has happened in her life. And I don't even know if it's terrible, because, and I guess that's not even the right word, because she's using it as a powerful thing to help her husband, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And as a result of it, quite frankly, he's already gone through some procedures and he's handling them. And they're statistically like he's doing much better than others. And then we had that conversation saying, of course he is, because he already has a healthy diet. He already understands all the concepts and ideas and the things that you went through. You already had him practicing. So maybe going through it with you was practice for him to be ready for what he had to go through now. So perspective and the choice of our mindset, such a powerful player in the big thing of, in the big picture of things. And I never want to lose sight of that for all our listeners. The power of the mind is powerful, is very, very powerful. I don't mean in a way that you just, you jump up and down and hoot and holler and say, I'm not afraid, or, I got this. But the actions that gives the support to the mental capacity to move forward, when you get those two things going together, super, super powerful. So that was clinical insight number one. The other one, a little bit different. And this is, I'll just call it clinical insight two. And I just mentioned that the girl who had the cancer has now this new lifestyle as a result of it. So this next one's a little bit different. So this young lady, I saw her about 2 years ago, and she was a new mom. No, this was right after her second baby, like 7 months after her second baby. So she's a mom times 2, and she's in full out adrenal, kind of fatigue. Yeah. And I see this all the time. I still say the most tired people I ever meet in my life are moms.
Yeah.
And they got it. They're short. Their bodies have just gone through it for 9 months plus. And then they become like, their hip becomes like a stool, like they put a baby on it, and then the hormones go out of whack and they don't get any rest. And it's a hard job. I never really knew until I started looking at my practice. Wow, look at how many moms I have. Look how much adrenal, support I have to give people. So she did amazing. We did an adrenal protocol with her. She understood it. Just having I think having someone just listen to her, and help her understand that it's okay as a mom, that you're allowed to get help. You're allowed to call timeout. You're allowed to call in some support if you can. And in that role, that's where I played, helping her with the adrenal support and helping her recognize the value and the power of that. She has to have these little timeouts in her life. Otherwise, she'll be no good for her children or her husband, or, or most importantly, herself. So we go through this adrenal protocol, and she ends up on the other side like a rock star.
Nice.
Yeah, literally like balanced hormones, feeling good, exercising. Because during it, she was so fatigued that she would then try to exercise. Makes sense. A lot of people think, well, maybe if I exercise, I get a little bit more energy. The more she exercised, the more tired she got. And that, for our listeners, listen, that's a red flag right there. The more exercise you get, the more tired it makes you. That's a red flag that you're having a hard time keeping up with tissue breakdown, and a lot of that collagen repair and vitamin C being pushed into the body comes from the adrenal glands, and that means they can't do it. She had a lot of brain fog. She was gaining weight, even though she was exercising and eating meticulously. So those subtleties are really like writings on the wall when it comes to adrenal fatigue. So anyway, she goes through this, put on a good protocol. She holds the court, and I didn't see her. So I took care of her for a while. She did really good, and I set her free. She went and raised a couple kids and did all her thing. And sure enough, came back in the office. I could tell just by the way she looked that she probably took, she went backwards again. And so this is the interesting part of this clinical insight. So when we have the conversation, I said, what's going on? She said, man, everything's come back. I'm gaining weight again. I'm absolutely exhausted. I have no libido, all of the above. I said, okay, give me some insight. What's life look like? How stressful things? Oh my goodness, COVID has been hell. The kids have been home the whole time. And literally, this is real. So this was just a reminder that a lot of people had to change their lives, especially if you had children.
Yeah.
And I know for some people, they were able to make the best of it, but that's not the case. If you had a job,
people had to work from home while their kids were home, so they were trying to homeschool while working a full-time job from home, and their husband's trying to work a full-time job from home on a screen next to them while they've got, one of my friends had 4 kids at home, two-year-old twins, and she was expected to work a full-time job and her husband over Zoom. How, the kids don't just go and do their own schoolwork at 2,
and that's really what the scenario was. So here we are again. We have an exhausted mom who's trying to do a little bit of everything, and I get that nobleness, and I get that position that a lot of the moms take. I don't have another option, but I'm going to do it all, and that's usually the mindset that most of them have.
Yeah.
So what was interesting, then we have, as we were talking, I said, all right, so it sounds like we're revisiting an old situation. She's like, yeah, but I thought we fixed that. And that was the aha moment. And that was kind of all right, let's have this conversation.
Yeah.
Do what you did before. You're probably gonna get the results you did before. So, and with health, and I think a lot of our listeners understand that, yet at the same time, here on our show, Health Made Simple show, I'm always trying to simplify things as much as we possibly can, Karen. And it's also, and when we do that, a lot of times people get really, really good results. The areas that it's the easiest to slip are things like nutrition.
Yeah.
And when that starts to slip, it's like a snowball that builds momentum as it goes down the hill. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
It does.
And that's part of where this starts. So it was a couple glasses of wine because she wasn't sleeping good to get the kids up all night. And these are real things. I'm not knocking this. I get it. And then she was snacking. She'd make the meal with the kids and she'd eat with the kids. Not even like a meal, but just like every time she made lunch for the kids, she'd get a little this, get a little that. So all of these things came back, and and it gave me a moment to just kind of think about how often do we heal ourselves.
I've lost your sound. Can you guys hear him? Let me know in the chat. Or can you guys hear me? Just to make sure it's not on my side.
You got me?
Yeah. No, I got you now. Okay, that was yours.
That was me. I touched the button on my microphone, which I
stop touching it. Yeah. Hands up while you talk.
All right, my last little bit on this. Yeah, it's as a practitioner, I often see how we often easily forget once we've overcome something, how easy it is for us to forget and go backwards. Simple things, bringing gluten back into the diet, a little more alcohol here and there. There's a lot of things. And I watch a lot of people. I'm like, man, do you remember what we just went through last year? You remember you took 200 supplements a day and you had to all this kind of stuff. So a reminder for all the listeners, listen, if you put a lot of work in, don't give up your good habits. Keep stacking. Keep making it simpler and simpler for yourself, and recognize that truth is that being healthy in today's environment, in today's world, it is a full-time job. What makes that job easier, what makes it easier is we make the action steps habits.
Yeah.
Get up every morning, 5:30, do 20 minutes of exercise.
Yeah.
Right. We prepare our meals instead of going out every night. When we get used
Yeah.
to doing those things, it gets easier. So the second part of my, clinical insight today is that sometimes let's not be so forgetful of how, like the good things that we've done. And again, it's perspective. When it comes to health, I don't know many things that we fix and what we're done with.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing journey. So the two very different but very similar perspectives. The young lady has cancer. She recognizes that even though she's clear, she doesn't go back to her old habits. She maintains the good ones and stacks upon them and chooses a mindset that serves her and now even her husband. And then a different perspective of things have gone wrong, adrenal fatigue, fixed it, in the quotation marks or air marks here, fixed it. Moving forward, it all happens again because we went right back to the same old thing. So, just perspective.
Totally. And last week when we were talking about aging, I brought up the blue zones, and in that book, there's a book about these blue zones, so these areas where people live till over 100 in good health. And there was a story about it was just talking about your environment and kind of what you're talking about. And there was a guy who lived in New York, and I can't remember what type of cancer, but he ended up being diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so he decided to go home. He was from one of these blue zones. He was living in New York City. He decided to go home, let's say to the island in Greece or wherever. He decided to go home. He was terminal. There was nothing else anyone could do for him. So he went there, but the complete change in environment, changed what he ate, changed obviously everything. He actually went into remission. He started to go back into remission. He completely, was clear of his cancer. So he thought, he thought, wow, yay, let's go back to New York. This will be amazing. We're back to New York. Cancer came right on back because he went back to his old lifestyle. And the story there was just talking about that. Well, that was more around power of environment, but it's the same thing.
It really is. And that's actually a great way of looking at it as well, where our environment's huge. And that goes for like being, it's simple when I say this, but we should be in healthy relationships, right? We should be in an environment that serves our well-being, or a job that's fulfilling, and all of those different things. So environment is absolutely positively huge. Like it's a monster. Yeah. So good. All right. So let's dive in. So
we're going to, tell us about, you must get people all the time that come in and say, I just don't feel right.
I do. So that version, so especially doing functional medicine, functional nutrition, and we're often kind of the last resort. It's changing a little bit, but there's many of the men and women out there doing what we're doing. Get some of the trickier cases, quite frankly. The cases that they've been to their doctors and they said, oh, maybe that's in your head or whatever it may be. And so it's not uncommon that I'll have someone and I'll say, what's going on? What brings you here today? Tell me about you and your health. And they say, I'm just not right. And that's like the consult. There must be something wrong. I've been to these doctors. I've had different lab work, etc. But something's just not right. And that's really why I want to talk. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. That individuals, there's just something wrong with me. I don't know what it is. And are there some scenarios where there's something in our brain? Like, I don't mean like tumor or a bug or anything like that. Like, is it this something like psychosomatic where our brains are like conjuring up different things? I bet that there's some situations, Karen, that there are. Yet I don't think it's the predominant one. I think because I see these cases, I do think that some of us have probably like we put a little more drama into our symptoms, and then we can manifest some things. I believe that to be true as well. Yet in a lot of these scenarios, when people there's just something, I'm just not right, and that's what I want to dive in tonight, because there is a very specific strategy, and I'm going to break that down tonight, even though I won't get into all the protocols. There's a very specific strategy. And what do you do if those words are coming out of your mouth? And what does that really mean?
And especially when you go to often when you go to a traditional medical doctor, kind of what you're saying, they often do kind of tell you maybe it is in your head, or maybe it's stress often. Maybe especially women, men too, but more when women go to a doctor, often they'll be like, oh, I think, it's just stress. And not that stress isn't a part, but there's no help or there's no steps. It's just, oh, well, you're stressed, or, it's in your head, or there's no
Yeah.
plan.
I'm always like taken back a little bit when I hear that's what they've been told. And so I want to be compassionate on both sides. I'm compassionate for the doctor. Maybe it's just way out of their league.
Yeah.
There's no doubt some things that show up my I don't know. Like, so, I do the best that I can and still creating strategies to build health. Rarely do I try to put it back on the individual and say, this is just in your head. I couldn't imagine that coming out of my mouth. I'm not sure if it comes out of other doctors' mouths, like this is all in your head. I've been told that numerous times, so maybe it really does happen. I pray that it doesn't. So let's dive into. So Karen, in kind of an overarching diagnosis or a perspective, when we hear those things, there is something out there called post-viral syndrome, PVS. Post-viral syndrome happens after, and it's been very common for years. We're talking what happens, the symptoms that happen after having a virus. Remember, a virus enters the body, and then its job is to really, all it wants to do is multiply. It wants to take over other cells in your body, maybe beat up some mitochondria along the way. And who knows, it could take over certain cells that control and coordinate certain organs in the body, like the thyroid, maybe the liver, like Epstein-Barr likes both the thyroid and the liver. It could be something like Lyme. It could be so many of these different types of viruses. And what over the years, so PVS, post-viral syndrome, is not something new.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we're calling this like long hauler syndrome and stuff like that. But this is nothing new. It just happened to be when we would see it in the past, you saw solo cases of it, a case here, a case there, and so it was hard to really put in perspective exactly what was taking place because we didn't have thousands of people that had a virus at the same time. So the observation clinically was harder, but now it's a lot more clear. And it's what's clear is exactly what we thought before, that there are such things as what we call post-viral syndrome. And it boils down to about 4 different causes of them. And I'll go over those tonight. And that's what we really want to know. Everyone listening tonight, there's really 4 different causes. Now, these symptoms, this is some of the symptoms: fatigue, brain fog, overwhelm, confusion, lack of interest, joint pain, hair loss, loss of taste and smell. These are all some similar ones that we, like more common ones that we've heard lately. I said brain fog, gut issues, weight gain.
Yeah.
Unexplained weight gain coming on. A lot of these different things, chronic fatigue, you and I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So chronic fatigue is a classic diagnosis of post-viral syndrome.
Okay.
And the listeners might be saying, but I've never heard of post-viral syndrome. My doctor's never mentioned that. And I understand that. And that's because when you have a virus, typically, so we'll talk about like what COVID-19, there was common symptoms, and we'll say that it was a fever, right? And a lot of viruses come with fevers. And then the post-viral symptoms might not have fever at all. They're a whole different group. Maybe it's brain fog. Maybe there's confusion. Maybe there's ringing in the ears. Maybe there's hair loss. And so those two usually aren't looked at as being connected. And often the post-viral syndrome symptoms take 2 to 4 months to show up.
Yeah.
And that's our health observation, especially in our healthcare system. It's so short term. So if it happened 2 or 4 months ago, it's almost just thrown out as if, well, that was then, this is now. So I want to kind of break down the 4 different things that if these are the words that come out of your mouth, it's something is just not right. Or maybe, very specific, man, ever since I had the virus, I've had brain fog. Ever since I had the virus, I'm putting on, crazy amount of weight, or I'm losing weight. Something's changing. I have no energy. My mood has changed. My cycle is off. My gut is in awful shape. Any of those types of things, just kind of pay attention. And then, of course, if you need to do a deeper dive, be happy to help you in that scenario as well here. So the first thing is this. So the first thing that we want to observe is do you have some level of adrenal dysfunction? So this is number 1. Why is this number 1? So adrenals, just a little recap here. Your adrenal glands are essentially your stress management glands. They are the ones that help us in fight or flight situations to protect our lives, which is cool. They produce cortisol, some other hormones like testosterone. So there's a lot of things that these little adrenal glands, sit on top of your kidneys. And if they get dysfunctional, what'll happen is one of the most classic symptoms is energy. You start to get fatigue. We'll really start to see things like you get a decent night's sleep and you're still awake tired. That is not okay. And we see a lot of this in PVS, post-viral syndrome. So the adrenals are the ones that are going to give us our most, say, protective mechanisms. And they also, if your adrenals start to get fatigued and you start to run out of the hormone they produce called cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And in the beginning, it's very difficult to recognize if you have an adrenal issue because your body produces a hormone called cortisol, which generally feels as if you're producing a lot of adrenaline or you're producing a lot of testosterone for that matter. So you're not necessarily feeling bad as it's taking place.
Yeah, in those beginning stages.
Correct. In those beginning stages, as you're like wearing out the motor. And then eventually what happens is you end up in a little bit of what we call a wired and tired phase. And that's where you're starting to get tired, but you're wired at night. And that's where we start to see the writing on the wall for the adrenal glands starting to be a little bit dysfunctional. And right here, right now, that's when we have to start to look at it. And we can test for this. So in the event that you have brain fog, another classic example or like kind of a symptom is you bend over and you come up and you get dizzy.
Okay.
But that dizzy may last 15 seconds. It might last 20 seconds, maybe as long as a minute. You're in yoga class, you bend forward and you come up, you did a downward fold, and all of a sudden you're like lightheaded. So if that's starting to happen with any type of frequency, if it happens 1 or 2 times, maybe it's blood sugar, but if that's starting to happen with any frequency, that's a sign that your adrenals can't keep up with the changes your body's making.
Okay.
And that the simple physiology behind that, when we bend over and put the heart below, like, we put it down like in downward dog, it's easy for gravity takes blood back into the heart. So it's very unstressful. The moment we stand up, we're against gravity and that creates stress. So your adrenal glands respond by increasing your blood pressure. And that's what keeps us not getting dizzy. Increasing the blood pressure keeps blood oxygen circulating so you don't get dizzy. So when I start to see dizziness and blood pressure changes, always a possibility is the adrenal glands. That's another one. Blood pressure, post-viral syndrome. You see blood pressure.
High blood pressure.
Blood pressures, starting to creep up. No other apparent real changes. Diet hasn't changed, stress hasn't changed, et cetera. So once we see that there are potentially any of these, we have to address them, no matter what other causes might be out there. Because in the event that your adrenals are getting tired, and folks, this goes for anything. If you have dysfunctional adrenals, they have to be addressed alongside whatever you're dealing with, because you won't heal with your adrenals being dysfunctional. They literally, Karen, they hold about 50% of all the vitamin C in the body. They store it up, and they help things like your skin. And that's another symptom, like you start to bruise a little bit easier. Your body doesn't repair or recover as fast. You might start to see, your skin change a little bit. It could get a little wrinkly, a little easier. All of those things go back to the adrenals. Good, robust adrenals have plenty of vitamin C. They can bind up collagen really easy, and your skin stays good, strong, healthy, and vibrant.
Awesome. Sometimes you might not know that you've had the virus, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people are dealing with this after COVID, but some people might not know that they've had a virus and then have some of these symptoms, but it actually was caused by a virus in the beginning. Is that right?
So we're going to get to that one in just a moment here, because that's part of post-viral syndrome. There's one group of viruses you might not even never know, have known that you've had. And COVID, again, just helped us kind of look at these things in sense of, we have this big pool of research right now because there's so many people that have dealt with it. So the adrenal glands definitely have to be at least observed. And what that means, if you had a bunch of those symptoms, you can go to your practitioner and get some decent adrenal support. If you test for them, the advantage of testing for them, it's not super expensive. Saliva testing is the way that has to go. We have to do a function. We want to know what's in the tissue. We measure the cortisol through the course of the day. Ideally it's high in the morning, and it starts to fade, and it goes down by the time you get to, by the time you go to bed. Measuring some of the other hormones like DHEA or even testosterone along the way is probably pretty helpful, and progesterone. I typically always measure progesterone when I'm testing the adrenals, because what's interesting is if the adrenals run out of cortisol, they start to steal the sex hormones. And one of the first ones is progesterone. And women that, are still in childbearing years and they lose their progesterone, that's when you don't feel good. That's when your libido goes, when your skin changes, the weight happens, all of those things. So we're able to see that on an adrenal test. We see, oh, your adrenals are going south. They're going to start to steal. It's called a progesterone steal. Your adrenal glands just think, hey, it's more important that we manage stress than it is to have a sex hormone. So testing is pretty important at that phase, especially if you're in there must be something wrong with me, I just don't feel right category. So testing those, not too difficult. There's saliva. You do it at home. That's nice. It happens all in one day. You fill a bunch of vials, send it in. Usually your practitioner will get the results in about 7 to 10 days. And they may have it where, like myself, where we sit down on Zoom, we go through it all, we go through results, figure out a protocol, boom. And like the woman I talked about earlier, before you know, you're back to rock star status. Yeah. And I feel pretty confident about that. Been down that road myself. And I will tell you, once you start to heal up your adrenals, you'll see a lot of other things get pretty stout as well.
Yeah. And I'm sure, people, if we're talking about coming into COVID, a lot of people probably had adrenals on the edge anyway. Like a lot of us potentially are thrashing our adrenals as it is. And then even if before we got COVID, we went into, potentially lockdowns or stress situations, then to have something like the virus on top is there's probably, a lot of people need to look at it.
100%. I would say pre-COVID, that was probably one of the very top things that I dealt with in my clinic.
Yeah.
Was adrenal dysfunction, adrenal fatigue. And that was because there's so many people that walking around with lack of energy, they're walking around with a little bit of brain fog and all those symptoms that go with it. And again, it maybe even if it isn't the primary cause, if they have been disrupted, you got to get them healed up. Yeah. So that's number one. If you've had if you just don't feel right, there's something wrong with you, you got to at least know the status of your adrenal glands. And if they are not at, a nice, robust place where they're healthy function, you got all the right hormones and the right, levels and everything, then that becomes a first target for you. And there may be others, but that's at least where you start. So the second thing,
What's number two?
Second one's just kind of a short conversation, but it's immune and specifically, so immune function. So often people be like, my immune system's fine, I don't get sick often, or they're telling the other thing, I'm getting sick so easily nowadays.
Yeah.
This is really simple though, and because it is really all about vitamin D levels.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I talk about immune, our ability, the vitamin D plays such an important role in our ability for our immune system to be functional. So getting a test and knowing your vitamin D levels is absolutely important. So this weekend,
and it's really easy test, right?
So easy. It really is.
And cheap, or cost effective.
Yeah, cost effective, right? So I think the test, I think we have it in our office. You literally they're on our front counter. You would come in, pick one up, take it home, prick your finger, send it in, get results in a couple of days.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I think they're $70, $55, $75, something like that.
Yeah.
Worthy. And I'll tell you why. So I don't know how many cases or labs I've run. I run it my overall panel as well. I use these. A lot of these, I use them as the follow-up. Mm-hmm. And I did is I copied and pasted for the attendees this weekend, probably, I don't know, as many till it bored me. Like I was right, I'm done with this. 20, 50 of my last labs, and they're all low in vitamin D. All of them.
Yeah. Wow.
Not some of them. All of them.
And a lot of these people probably live in Florida. Do they?
Yes. Yeah, I would say at least 50% did. At least 50%
which did. I'm assuming you guys get quite a lot of sun.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. And a lot of them taking vitamin D.
Wow. They're taking vitamin D and still can't get their levels up.
Yep. Well, here's the thing. One, there's a couple of them. It could be a quality issue, and you could be at the wrong dose.
Yeah.
And that's why, so when I see that and they say, well, I'm already taking, 2,000 IUs a day or whatever they're taking. If they're taking a high load, anything above 5,000, I haven't switched products up for whatever reason. And then there's, which we're about to get into, the very next one is gut health. Okay. In the event that your gut isn't functioning properly and you're taking supplement, especially something like vitamin D, you're probably not going to absorb it properly. Yeah. And this one is a huge one because, again, the challenge we have in our healthcare system today, if you go to your doctor and say, Doc, I'm just exhausted all the time. I sleep 8 hours. I'm eating right, but I'm just exhausted all the time. They're going to say, sorry, buddy, like it's in your head, or, they don't test for adrenals. That's my point. They don't do saliva testing. They don't do functional testing. And then when it comes to your gut, even though the number one reason for a doctor's visit in our country is gut issues, there's not a lot of doctors out there have yet to figure out that they got to heal the gut instead of just trying to shut the symptoms up. The heartburn and indigestion, all of that stuff. So we are literally a culture, I think this is worldwide, of just a beat down microbiome. And in this scenario, and this is what we'll be doing a deep dive in this weekend. We've talked about it here in the Health Made Simple podcast. Is about the 4 R's.
Yeah.
Right. So we got to, when it comes to gut health, folks, just I'll review these real quick. And if you have a chance, you got to do some gut work, go back and about, a couple episodes ago before we did an entire one on gut health. But there's 4 R's, which the 4 R's to heal your gut, which you got to remove the bad guys. And oftentimes that means everything from the junk coming in. So we got to clean up the diet. There's no doubt about that. We've got to also, remove the bad guys, meaning there could be some abnormal, parasites in there, all that kind of stuff. So we've got to get rid of those, all the bad food coming in, all the toxins coming in. We got to remove all of that. Number 2, we got to repair. If most people are walking around with some level of leaky gut, some people have no idea what leaky gut is. And it's literally when the stuff on the inside of your intestines leaks out and goes into your body. And when that happens, you have an immune response, which means inflammation, systemic inflammation through the course of your body. And oftentimes it creates very specific things. It can lead to Hashimoto's. It can lead to a lot of other autoimmune conditions. Yet we got to heal that up. And how does it break down? It's years of stress. It's years of medications. The number one thing is probably, there's 2, it's antibiotics, Karen, and then something called glyphosate.
Oh yeah.
We talked a lot about that in that show that night. So I would, encourage people everyone just really needs to work on their gut, which is the reality. So that is the other part of the post-viral syndrome, is that the virus wreaks havoc on our microbiome. It wreaks havoc on our mitochondria. And along that way, often there's medications that are taken, there's stress that's happening, there's food changes that are taking place, and the gut takes a beat down. Yeah. And we've even talked about a lot of the protocols that we used on this show, that are used out there generally. We said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good. It's protecting you from the virus, or it's helping you get through that thing. But what it's doing on the gut and the microbiome level is a whole different thing. And the other thing, so in the next one, you'll understand why the gut gets so affected. Yeah, those 4 R's, we have to remove, repair, then we have to essentially replenish, right? Regrow. That's when we had the probiotics in. So prior to that, I usually, to start the repair, the remove, we use things like a digestive enzyme. We use something called Zypan. And then we're starting to repair it. We're using collagen. We're using L-glutamine, things to heal up that leaky gut. When we get into the regrowing, then that's when we're thinking about all those good fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi. And again, this is all while we're only putting clean food into our body.
Yes.
So here's the big overarching look of the post-viral syndrome, is that most people's diets go to crap after a virus.
Well, once they're tired, the time that I feel like, is the hardest to, or hardest is the wrong word, but when diets do go the wrong way is when you're tired, right?
Yeah, that's spot on. That's exactly why we're exhausted. And we know the simplest way to get a little bit of energy bump is by taking a little bit of carbohydrates, and then things start to slip back in. And if you had a little bit of a dysbiosis where the bad bacteria was a little bit more than the good bacteria in your gut, and you start feeding those simple sugars or simple carbohydrates, then it becomes massively out of balance. So that's where the gut plays such an important role in. And unfortunately, in our everyday culture right now, it's not being looked at. Now, Karen, as we get dysfunction with the gut, and we talked about this in the show, massive brain fog, concentration issues, emotional disturbances, anxiety, I call them blues. I don't even like to use the word depression, but depression, all of these things, because so many of those neurotransmitters, they begin in the gut. Yeah. And same thing with the vitamin D levels. Now, the reality is what I've observed in these last 3 years, for the most part, everyone has low vitamin D levels. Okay?
Yeah. So, crazy.
Yeah. when I test the adrenals based on the symptoms, we see adrenal dysfunction. I'm not saying everyone has it, but a lot of the symptoms we talked about tonight, when I start to see those, and a lot of times I almost talk people out of the test. I'll say, Karen, hold your $200. I already know.
And if let's just start the protocol because you need it.
Let's just dive in, literally save the $200. You use that money on other things that are going to help you get healthier.
Supplements and
so the adrenals, we know that they get dysfunctional. We know the diet goes south after we're not well. That's pretty classic right across the board. We're tired, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now it gets into the real tricky part. We talked about the immune system. Then the fourth part here is when we go through an event like that, say something, like we have post-viral syndrome. One of the biggest challenges is something called stealth pathogens.
Okay.
Those are other viruses that already exist in your body. And then when you end up getting wonked by this new one, whatever it may be, and the other new ones that are coming, because you have all those others in your body, it wreaks havoc on your entire system.
Okay.
And not in a way
to I guess come alive because your immune system is down. Is that right?
Yeah, because it's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
You have low vitamin D.
You're weaker. Yeah.
You're weaker. You got it. You're a weaker human being. You got fear. You got anxiety. This is what happened these past 2 years. There was a little bit of fear. I don't care who you are. You had some fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something anyway. There was fear of something. Yeah.
Yeah. There's fear of something. So there was fear. There was the uncertainty. There was a lack of leadership. We were super vulnerable. Our capacity's down, our blood sugar's up. Here in the States, there was more fast food sales and alcohol sales than the other prior years.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, so when we look at it, we created this very, very vulnerable situation for exactly what viruses want.
Here they closed everything except liquor stores. Very
So the stealth pathogens, here's what's kind of interesting about them. So they're viruses, they're opportunistic, they're literally looking for us to make a mistake. Yeah. So, when I run my panels, like our lab panel, especially I have an extended male and extended female panel, comprehensive panels, that's what we call them. I always run Epstein-Barr tests, and Epstein-Barr is a stealth pathogen, it's viral. And once it's in your body, it stays. Most people say, I don't have that. It waits until you get weakened. And so for this weekend showing for the participants, I'm going to show them lab after lab after lab after lab after lab after lab. So this year so far, Karen, I have 2 people of all the labs. We're in April. What are we, April? And I run a lot of labs. I run a lot of labs. I only have 2 people that have not tested positive for Epstein-Barr virus, having the antibodies.
Wow. Everybody else does.
Everybody.
Even if they've never, this is especially with Epstein-Barr, even if you think you've never had it, right? Like you don't have to have had it.
So I've never had monos. That's really where it comes from. Yeah. I've never had mono per se, yet I test positive for the Epstein-Barr virus. And what that means is that virus is lying dormant in my body, and my body is doing what it should do. It keeps it there. It's it kind of puts it in a stalemate. And that's what our body's really good at until we have a prolonged situation of stress, adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigues. This will give life to these viruses. You get hit with a whomper that literally you don't have enough vitamin D to activate all your different cells, your immune cells, and you get hit with a different type of virus that either creates fever or it creates some other dysfunction within the body, and the body has to use its resources, all these different resources, to manage now your fear, your anxiety, and this other new virus. So essentially it lets the prisoners go out and play. And those will be all the different ones that are completely overlooked. There is no simple medication for Epstein-Barr. And I'm just talking about one of them, Karen. I'm talking Epstein-Barr.
Because it stays in, doesn't it? It just stays.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's, viruses, we don't kill them. Bacteria, yes, we do. Viruses, the goal is that we inhibit their ability to function in our immune system, basically kind of starves them, it strangleholds them is really what we want. When I talk about Epstein-Barr, I'm just talking about one of the most common ones that people have heard about a little bit. And it has a tendency to really to wreak havoc on your liver, really wreak havoc on things like your thyroid. We see a lot of post-virals people now all of a sudden have thyroid dysfunction. And again, that's definitely gut, it's definitely immune, it's definitely liver. So those all fall into play there. So but these are others too. Shingles, which is part of the herpes simplex, herpes, all of them, 1 through whatever there is now, 11. Lyme, all of these different viruses that are in the body now have an opportunity to wreak havoc on you. And they don't always have very clear like symptoms. Sometimes it's just something wrong. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on in my body. Something's just not right. And this is the step. These are the procedures. We got to check the adrenals. You got to make sure that you know the status of the adrenals. We got to check the immune system. If you're low vitamin D, you got to at least start there. If you want to get right, knowing that there's so many different receptors in the body for vitamin D, if you're low, a lot of them are going to be dysfunctioning. So we got to make sure that happens. We got to make sure we check gut health and be honest with it, right? Are there tests for the gut? There's all kinds of tests. I think the easier route is, listen, why don't you just get good with your health? Like when it comes to the 4 R's. So this isn't rocket. This should be all part of our practice anyways. Remove all the crap from our diets, right? Like that should eventually be part of the strategy of being superhuman. And it's really simple. All right, if doesn't have one ingredient, leave it alone, right? Let's just get back to the simple stuff here. And then of course, we want to start to repair. It's a great idea. It's not that difficult. This is what I love about the 4 R's that we came up with. It's easy to repair, quite frankly. We can heal up those junctions. A little bit of L-glutamine and getting a little collagen in your coffee every day. Fantastic place to do it. We've talked, for, a long time. How long have we been doing this? 2 years now?
Okay. So next week will be our 100th episode.
Whoa. Boom.
Oh no, I just saw that.
That's awesome. Right. Really?
Yeah. This is episode 99.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, we've always talked about like fermented foods and kombuchas and sauerkraut. And then of course there's probiotics. And then how do we go about probiotics? Pick your favorite one, throw a dart, and then pick another bottle and keep rotating those in. But that's the regrow phase. And then the 4th R is rebalance. Look at life.
Yeah.
Look at life. Look at your sleeping patterns. Look at your waking patterns. Look at, where do you have some yin in your life? Do you have a little yoga? Do you have a little meditation? Do you have a breathing practice? Do you have a gratitude practice? Are you edifying someone every day? The simple things that really can help you rebalance the energy of your body. And that's what these viruses and bacteria don't want you to do. So we got to take a look at the 4 R's: immune system, adrenals, and then of course, stealth pathogens. Is there a very specific protocol that we can use for stealth pathogens? Yes. And we've talked about that. I think we even did an entire I think we did, right? A podcast on stealth pathogens. So if anyone's curious what that is, look it up. It's very strategic, and the different herbs we use some very specific ones like myrrh, thuja. There's echinacea.
But that was something that is better to work with you or another practitioner on, right? Because you cycle in and out of some specific herbs.
There really is a specific strategy that, especially when you're dealing with stealth pathogens, and every body is a little bit different. Those pathogens just want to survive and they want to multiply as well. So when they get in a battle, they might fight back a little bit. And it's not something to be afraid of. Sometimes you can have a little symptoms here and there. So working with someone that has some experience in that situation, or managing those is definitely smart here. So again, those 4 different things, those are that this weekend coming up. I'm going to be doing that and a bit more, but it's a deep dive that we're going to be talking about when I go down to Orlando. Yet if you're listening to this, and again, the words just, I just don't feel right. There's just this, there must be something wrong here, and you can't really even define it. Or maybe you can. Maybe the other part of that is you can very specifically say, ever since blank, I've got this massive brain fog. I can't concentrate on anything. I can't think of names. I can't put sentences together. My gut's been awful ever since, or I've got, a lack of energy, this fatigue. I'm just not right. That's where you got to do this deep dive. And the good news is that, and listen, I also want to say, I didn't come up with this on my own. I've been sharing and conversing with all the great practitioners out there, and collectively putting great minds together. we're literally conversing and saying, well, what are you doing in this scenario? What works and what doesn't work? And we all had a lot of these little different individual strategies trying to deal with the particular symptom. For example, brain fog. Do I have a brain tonic? Yes. Do we have to do a deeper dive than the brain tonic? Yes. We may add the brain tonic, but there is a deeper dive when we start to see, these symptoms, especially when they're prolonged like this. So a lot of great practitioners out there that can be supportive in this. And this is, hopefully, my goal is that by the time I get done teaching this audience this weekend, there's gonna be a lot of great practitioners being able to go back to their communities and help a lot of people, because there's a lot of, unfortunately, Karen, I know we're running short on time here. The other day I had a lady come in, and I hadn't seen her and I hadn't seen her about at least 3 years. And, and I kind of have the same opening every time I say, good to see you. Welcome back. Tell me about yourself. What brings you here today? Taking care of yourself. And she stood there, and she's probably in early 60s. I don't think she's maybe like late 50s, a little bit older than me. And she literally just standing there, and like the words weren't coming out of her mouth. And I said, hello, like jokingly, like, is anyone in there? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I have such bad brain fog. She's like, I rarely get sense out. And then I asked her, so
terrible brain fog. Yeah.
Awful. And not the funny thing, but the interesting thing is her daughter referred to me, and I take care of her daughter, and her daughter really knows all this. She's a very intelligent girl. She's like, yeah, you got to help my mom. She definitely has, post-viral syndrome ever since COVID. Yeah. So unfortunately, she's been like this. She had the COVID early, like in the early part of 2020. And 4 or 5 months after that, she hasn't been right. And she literally has seen every doctor under the sun. There was more, like she showed me her portal, like her on her phone of all the different doctor's visits and all the diagnosis and all that kind of stuff. I would have been there for an hour, and we said, okay, you're willing to just let me take the lead here, because unfortunately, when you have brain fog, you're not really good at making deep decisions.
Yeah.
It was more of a trust and and a relationship that, thank goodness, I had built between her and her daughter, that she essentially said, yes, just tell me what to do at this point. And that's often where those people get to, unfortunately, when they have, brain fog and fatigue combined.
It's awful, because nobody is helping it. So I've got a couple of friends here who are almost the thing that scares them most about COVID is that there's nobody. What do we do when we get these? I'm seeing these people get these long hauler symptoms, and I don't know what to do.
Let's not forget about hair loss. Massive. Yeah.
And is this what about after the vaccine for some people, if they're having these same kind of protocols?
Yeah. I'm seeing them with both. So there's the vaccine and the virus both cause cytokine storm, and they both potentially cause different types of vascular issues with clotting. So, and again, regardless of either one, it's just we're headed back. We're headed back to cleaning out the body, getting things right. So, this weekend we'll do a deep dive into what God's garden is, and why we use it, and the different foods, to start using food as medicine again. And it's time we get back there and recognize that nutrients come from foods, and the human body needs nutrients. And if we don't eat the right foods, we don't have the right nutrients, and we can't be really good humans. So it's not real rocket science. And obviously I always go back to making health simple, and it really is, if we let it be. It's simpler than we made it out to be, and I think we're ripe right now, and that's why I'm excited about this weekend teaching doctors. I think we're ripe right now, where a lot of people out there are looking for the opportunity. All right, we had our we had a blindfold on, and our hands were down, and we took a sucker punch, and now what do we really need to be doing in order to move forward into the future and not be so vulnerable to have the whole world shut down because we had a virus?
Oh yeah, no, crazy. Hey, well, all right. So what is going to be our one action item that our listeners take from this episode to move them towards their goal of becoming superhuman?
It's real simple. It's going to be choose the mindset that serves you. And what I mean by that seems such like easy words, but sometimes the mindset that we have doesn't serve us. So flip that switch and let the mindset that you have, let it serve you. Let it be one that moves you into the place that you want to be.
Yeah, I love that so much. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. We'll be back same time, same place next week for our 100th episode of the Health Made Simple show.
I'm excited for that. And of course, thank you everyone for being here. Keep doing your thing, keep sharing it out, keep spreading the love here. You never know who you might impact by just sharing a little bit of information. And then of course, continue to take deliberate action for your mind, your body, your overall wellness. You all be awesome.